Okay, so buckle up because today's deep dive is going to be a wild ride.
I know, I'm excited already just glancing at the source material.
You guys sent in some seriously diverse and fascinating stuff this week. We're talking flat earth theories and pyramids and media meltdowns, like even the science of addiction.
And of course, that ever-evolving journey of personal growth, it's always a recurring theme.
It is, isn't it? It seems like no matter how many rabbit holes we go down, we always circle back to those fundamental questions of meaning and purpose and, just figuring out how to navigate this crazy thing called life.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of what makes these deep dives so engaging. We're all trying to make sense of the world around us, and sometimes the most unexpected connections can spark those aha moments.
Exactly. So let's dive right into the first layer of this week's rabbit hole. And trust me, this one is a doozy. We're starting with a flat Earth expedition to Antarctica.
You're not kidding. This is definitely not your average vacation.
No, not at all. Imagine this. 4 flat earthers and 4 people who believe in a round Earth. They all travel to Antarctica together for an experiment.
An experiment that costs $35,000 per person, by the way. Not exactly a budget-friendly trip.
Right. This whole thing was organized by a guy named Will Duffy. And the purpose was to see if they could observe the sun for a full 24 hours during the Antarctic summer, which is something that's supposedly impossible if you believe the Earth is flat.
I mean, it makes sense. If the Earth is a flat disk, then the sun would have to set at some point, right? Even in Antarctica.
Exactly. So they brought all kinds of equipment with them, like drones and 360 cameras. They even live streamed some of their findings to document what they were seeing.
What's fascinating is that reportedly, 3 of the 4 flat earthers ended up changing their minds after actually seeing the sun stay up for a full day.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. It really speaks to the power of firsthand experience, doesn't it? Sometimes seeing something with your own eyes can completely shatter even the most deeply held beliefs.
Absolutely, it creates this cognitive dissonance where your existing beliefs are challenged by conflicting evidence, and that can be a very uncomfortable experience for some people.
Totally. But here's the kicker. After the expedition, one theory that emerged among some flat earthers was that the whole experiment was actually faked at the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Wow, that's quite a leap.
It is, right? It just shows you how resilient certain beliefs can be. When presented with evidence that contradicts their worldview, some people would rather double down on their beliefs and dismiss the evidence as fake rather than reconsider their entire understanding of reality.
Which I guess speaks to how central some beliefs are to a person's sense of self.
Right. It's almost like their entire identity is built around those beliefs. Okay, let's shift gears completely now. Your sources also sent in some pretty mind-blowing claims about the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Oh yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
So apparently there are new findings that were just announced on March 16th. And they used a really advanced technology called synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography.
Which sounds incredibly complicated, but essentially it's like using sound waves but with vibrations to kind of see beneath the surface.
Right, it analyzes these tiny movements that are caused by background seismic activity to create a 3D picture of what's hidden underground.
And what they've supposedly found is pretty incredible. We're talking about massive structures extending about 600 meters down from the pyramid's base into the bedrock.
Yeah, and these structures are apparently connected to even deeper structures that reach up to 2 kilometers below the surface.
I mean, if true, that's absolutely huge. Some people are describing these structures as enormous pillars and coils. It's being called mind-blowing and narrative-shattering.
Yeah, even Graham Hancock, who's kind of a big deal in the alternative history world, was blown away by this news. But on the flip side, we have Zahi Hawass, who's a very prominent Egyptologist, and he's dismissing the whole thing as nonsense.
So we have this clash between potential paradigm-shifting discoveries and the skepticism of established archaeology.
It's a classic battle between those who are open to rewriting history and those who are more cautious and want to stick with the accepted narratives.
I think it's important to approach these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism while also remaining open to the possibility that there might be more to discover about ancient civilizations than we currently understand.
For sure. And ultimately, time will tell what's really going on beneath the Giza Plateau. Now let's switch gears again. Your sources also brought up the evolving media landscape, which is a topic that's always relevant.
Yeah, it feels like the media is changing faster than ever these days.
It really does. And one interesting observation that came up is that traditional media outlets seem to be increasingly relying on independent media figures to generate traffic and attention.
Almost like they're admitting that independent voices are where the real conversations are happening.
Right. There's this perception that legacy media outlets are losing their grip on the narrative, and they're having to turn to independent creators to stay relevant.
Which kind of undermines their whole claim of being the trusted sources of information, right?
Exactly. And then there was this discussion about how anything that's even remotely masculine is now being labeled as right-wing. They brought up a Media Matters study that listed a bunch of independent content creators as being right-leaning, sometimes without much justification.
Yeah, people like Joe Rogan and Lex Fridman were included on that list, even though their views are often nuanced and don't fit neatly into traditional political categories.
It just goes to show how difficult it is to define these terms in a meaningful way. And it also raises questions about the biases that might be present in media analysis itself.
Especially when you consider that the hosts of shows like Flagrant, which are known for being pretty outspoken, were also labeled as right-wing. It's like they're trying to fit everyone into these neat little boxes, and it just doesn't work.
The reality is much more complex and fluid than that, and I think this tendency to label everything as either left or right is actually contributing to the polarization we see in society today.
It's like we've lost the ability to engage in nuanced conversations where we acknowledge that people can hold a wide range of views that don't always align perfectly with one side or the other.
Absolutely, and the more we try to force everyone into these binary categories, the less likely we are to find common ground and actually solve problems together. Okay, now buckle up for this next part because things are about to get a little dark.
Oh, I sense we're about to enter the realm of extremism.
You got it. So they reference this clip from John Cleese where he talks about the appeal of extremism, and he basically says that extremism provides people with clearly defined enemies, which then allows them to feel morally justified in their negativity and even aggression.
Which is a pretty sobering thought.
It is, and it applies to both left-wing and right-wing extremism. It's all about creating an us versus them mentality, where they are the enemy and we are the righteous ones.
So by dehumanizing the other side, it becomes much easier to justify attacking them, both verbally and sometimes even physically.
Exactly. And they connected this to a lot of the online behavior we see these days, where people form bonds based on a shared hatred of particular outgroups.
Like, think about all the online mobs that form around canceling someone or attacking a company for something they did or said. It's often fueled by this righteous anger that comes from believing you're fighting against evil.
And then they brought up the controversy surrounding Lizzo, where her public image of body positivity was seemingly at odds with allegations of body shaming behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's an interesting example of how even seemingly positive messages can be undermined by accusations of hypocrisy.
Right. And they also mentioned Elon Musk's quote about caring about doing good, not the appearance of it. It's almost like he's trying to preempt those accusations by saying, look, I'm actually focused on making a real impact, not just virtue signaling.
Which is interesting because it suggests that he's very aware of this tendency to conflate outward appearances with genuine intentions.
Definitely. And I think it speaks to the broader challenges of authenticity in a world where everyone is constantly curating their image for social media.
It's like we're all performing to some extent, and it can be hard to tell who's being genuine and who's just playing a role.
Absolutely. Okay, let's wade into the next swampy area here. Online criticism.
Always a fun topic, right?
Oh yeah, who doesn't love a good dose of negativity? But seriously, they talked about how damaging online criticism can be, especially for people who are more sensitive to it.
Which is probably most of us, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we're all vulnerable to some extent. They even introduced this concept of criticism capture, where creators start changing their behavior and content to avoid negative feedback.
It's like they become so afraid of being attacked that they either become overly defensive or they just completely censor themselves to avoid any potential controversy.
And both of those reactions can be really detrimental to creativity and authenticity.
Totally. If you're constantly walking on eggshells, you're never going to produce your best work. And they even brought up the example of the backlash and vandalism directed at Tesla vehicles, which seems to be fueled by opposition to Elon Musk himself.
It just shows how extreme and personal things have become. It's like people are so invested in their beliefs that they're willing to damage property and even potentially harm others just to express their disapproval.
Which is really disturbing when you think about it. It suggests a complete breakdown of civil discourse and respect for differing viewpoints.
For sure. And I think it's a symptom of the broader trend of polarization we've been talking about. Okay, let's shift gears one more time. This next topic is about some concerning social trends that have been getting a lot of attention lately.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So we're talking about things like declining sperm counts, rising rates of obesity, and the fact that more women than men are now completing college degrees.
Yeah, these are definitely trends that are worth paying attention to.
They touched on Dr. Shauna Swan's research, which has found a possible link between exposure to certain plastics and declining sperm counts. It's pretty sobering stuff, especially when you consider the potential implications for human reproduction.
Right, it's like we're messing with our own biology without fully understanding the consequences.
And then there's the obesity epidemic, which is now considered the #1 form of malnutrition globally.
Which is mind-blowing when you think about it. It used to be that malnutrition was associated with poverty and lack of access to food, but now we have this problem of overabundance and unhealthy food choices.
It's almost like we've swung too far in the other direction. And then there's the gender gap in college completion. They discuss some possible reasons for this trend, including differing learning styles and maybe a lack of inspiring male role models in mainstream culture.
Yeah, there's also this idea of a purity spiral on the left, where any perceived imperfection or past mistake can lead to social ostracization,
Which might make it more difficult for men, especially, to navigate certain social circles.
especially if they don't conform to the prevailing narratives about masculinity.
Right. And they also touched on the impact of fatherless homes on young boys, which is a complex and sensitive issue.
It's a heartbreaking statistic that boys raised without fathers are more likely to end up in prison than to graduate from college.
It really highlights the importance of positive male role models in a young boy's life. And it raises questions about how we can better support families and communities to create a more equitable and supportive environment for all children.
Absolutely. It's a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted solution. Now let's move into the realm of personal growth, which is a topic that always seems to come up in these deep dives.
Yeah, it's like we're all on this journey of trying to figure out who we are and what we're meant to do with our lives.
And that journey can be messy and unpredictable.
No kidding. So they talked about this common human tendency to believe that achieving external markers of success, like money or fame, will somehow magically solve all our internal problems.
Which is a classic illusion, right? The idea that once I have X, then I'll finally be happy.
But then they pointed out how often we see wealthy and famous people struggling with addiction, depression, and all sorts of other issues.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly being reminded that external achievements don't automatically translate into inner peace or fulfillment.
Right. And they talked about the importance of learning certain life lessons firsthand, even though we often get warnings from elders and mentors.
It's like we have this innate need to experience things for ourselves, even if it means making mistakes along the way.
They quoted Naval Ravikant, who said, "It's far easier to achieve our material desires than it is to renounce them." And I think that's a really profound statement.
It speaks to the power of attachment and how difficult it can be to let go of the things we think we need to be happy.
Absolutely. And they also talked about how friendships can sometimes fade away during periods of significant personal growth.
Yeah, it's like we outgrow certain relationships as we evolve and change.
And that could be a really lonely experience. They called it a lonely chapter, where you feel disconnected from your old friends, but you haven't yet fully integrated into a new community.
It's like you're in this in-between space where you're not quite sure where you belong.
They contrasted this with the often idealized portrayal of self-improvement in the media, where everything seems so effortless and linear.
Right, it's all about manifesting your dreams and unleashing your inner badass.
But the reality is much messier and more challenging than that. There are setbacks, doubts, and moments where you just feel lost and confused.
And that's totally normal. Growth isn't always a smooth upward climb. There are going to be bumps along the way.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that everyone's journey is unique. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to personal growth.
Exactly. Okay, let's circle back to a question that's been kind of hovering over this whole conversation.
The question of why we humans so often disregard warnings and insist on learning things the hard way.
It's a good question. Why do we do that to ourselves?
They talked about how the very act of lacking something can create this illusion that obtaining it will be the key to happiness.
So we chase after money, fame, relationships, or whatever else we think is missing, only to realize that it doesn't actually bring us the fulfillment we were hoping for.
And then we're left feeling disappointed and wondering what to do next.
It's a classic cycle of desire and disillusionment. So what's the alternative?
They emphasize the importance of doing the internal work, which means focusing on cultivating inner peace, contentment, and self-acceptance, rather than relying on external achievements to validate our worth.
Which is much easier said than done, right?
It is. It takes a lot of self-awareness, honesty, and a willingness to confront our own limiting beliefs and patterns.
But I think it's ultimately the path to true and lasting happiness.
Agreed. Okay, let's wrap things up by reflecting on what we've covered in this whirlwind deep dive.
It's been quite a journey, that's for sure.
We started by questioning the shape of the Earth and exploring the possibility of hidden secrets beneath ancient pyramids.
We then navigated the treacherous waters of the media landscape and grappled with the complexities of extremism and online criticism.
And finally, we delved into the realm of personal growth and explored the challenges and rewards of this never-ending quest for self-discovery.
It's amazing how all these seemingly disparate threads connect to paint a picture of a world that's rapidly changing, deeply interconnected, and full of both wonder and uncertainty.
Absolutely. So as you go about your week, I encourage you to keep in mind the lessons we've uncovered today.
Challenge your assumptions, be open to new perspectives, and remember that true fulfillment comes not from external achievements alone, but from the journey of understanding yourself and your place in this vast and mysterious universe.
Well said. And on that note, I'll leave you with one final thought. Considering all the information we've explored today, what long-held belief might you be ready to examine with fresh eyes? Until next time, keep diving deep and keep questioning everything.
And most importantly, keep those amazing sources coming. We couldn't do this without you.
See you next time.